Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order, Policy Committee meeting. It's not a long meeting. First, Kara, do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay, I'm going to just do introductions, starting with Kara.
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Mary Kane, Senior Legal Counsel.
Liz Large, Contracted Single Legal Advisor.
Michelle DePass, board member.
Julia Brim Edwards, board member, committee member.
Patty Sullivan, Board Member, Committee Member.
Eddie Wong, board member.
Okay, so there's no public comment. We have two items on the agenda. One, they both have been on the agenda for quite some time, and I'm sorry that the meeting 2 weeks ago got canceled. I had an accident, and I couldn't make it to the meeting. So I'm going to start with the order there on the agenda. We have a cleaned up version of the lobbying and registration policy that's based on feedback from the last several committee meetings. And so I guess it's short, and I think it's worth noting that this is a registration, not a reporting policy, so it's kind of the most basic level of transparency, but not of very rigorous because it doesn't have a reporting mechanism in it. Does anybody want to go through it section by section, or do you feel like we've already done that, or is there any questions or discussion?
I feel like we've already done that, and I don't need to go over it again.
Take your time. That's
Yeah,
fine.
no, and I have no comments about it either. I was looking for the red line, but I think this is the final version that we've got in board book.
It reflects all the previous meetings' comments. Anything, Director Wong?
No, I missed last meeting. This was discussed. Was this? No questions right now.
Hey. Yeah. Do you want to join us on the dais? Yeah. Come on up. And you can start by, this will be like warm up for your board meeting. You can grab a seat, and here's the orientation I got.
Mm-hmm.
Your seat's here, and here's how you turn on the microphone.
Yep.
And it's hot. So why don't you go ahead, we just were starting the first agenda item. We already did introductions. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, so for the record.
Hello, my name is Ian. I'm the student representative-elect. And and I'm on policy committee.
Yeah, welcome to the policy committee. We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
We're just going through the both items we've had on the agenda for a number of meetings. I don't know, Director DePass, if you've had a chance to.
Yeah, I think I said at our last meeting when we discussed this that I like this. I think it increases transparency, and it kind of covers the area where our RFP process, it doesn't cover. The only thing that question I had is this for construction and for personal services contracts for both?
So,
I mean, is it
so the
solely based on
So the construction processes would all be going through like an RFP.
Okay.
I'm
The
looking for that. I'm
RFP,
looking for
yeah.
that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm looking beyond you to the
Yeah.
experts, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that those contracts go through our normal procurement and RFP process.
And those are under Oregon revised statute. I don't remember the number, but those are pretty strict contracting rules. Okay.
Right, so the PPS purchasing and contracting rules are based on those statutes. They do a little bit more, but they certainly meet that baseline.
Mhm.
To the extent those are required for an RFP process is required, it would not, they would be exempted from this process.
Okay, because that was my only question.
There may be low dollar value, technically construction, that are a $10,000 something that doesn't require competitive bidding. I don't know it to that level of detail. I want to be
Okay.
candid, but I think in the main, the big construction contracts are worth a lot of money, and they go through the,
Pretty rigorous process.
right, by statute and PPS policy.
Yeah, even most of the smaller ones, it's mostly the professional service contracts that aren't RFP'd, or, like I say, grants or expenditures or policies. And
So it could be like I guess, not a construction, but architectural engineering.
if they didn't go through one of our procurement processes,
it
but
says-
most of
yeah.
them do.
Okay.
That's my understanding as a general proposition, yes.
Anyone else?
Well, just that I had questioned if it was necessary for a while, but in talking to different people who I trust, they think it is. So I will go, I think it's fine.
This also kind of mirrors what other public entities have in terms of, identifying who you are and what the nature of your business is, especially if it relates to contracts.
Yeah, the one thing this, as I mentioned at the beginning, this doesn't have is a reporting, which is what would be pretty standard. And there's a cost to that. For example, ballparking another like public agency, it was like about for the like a robust regular reporting requirement would be about 200,000 for like the IT infrastructure, and then like a portion of an FTE to manage it. So this was the lower cost version. So I would say it's not on par with the state or Metro or Multnomah County's recent one. It's more than most other school districts have, but it is not like an ongoing reporting and disclosure. Also, the other thing is, in most other cases, it doesn't matter what the size of the expenditure is that you're lobbying on. It could be like a $10,000 thing, and this sets 100,000. And part of that is, obviously we have schools that have contracts and expenditures that, if you had a lower amount, the compliance burden would be pretty significant for our schools. So those are ways in which it differs from, I would say, some other ones. But I think it's a good first start, and if it turns out it's adopted and implemented, that the board should monitor whether it's having its intended impact of surfacing what we know is the engagement that's happening, and can look at whether changes need to be made. That's a foundational piece.
And then the other question I have is the district shall establish a registration and reporting system. So it's up to the district to, am I looking at the right version? June 23rd, yeah, I'm looking at the one in board book. Under district registration, the district shall establish a public registration and reporting system on its website. Is that,
Is that a editing issue, Liz? No?
I think that concept has been there, that it's not a, it's, the reporting as in, you can see it.
Reporting the registrations.
Right, you can see it, similar to the Metro version, I think is what this was built on. So you can go to the Metro website and click on and
Oh.
see who's on it. So it's, I don't know
It's
if
like a report of
Google
who's
Doc.
actually registered versus a report of activity, which you may be, like the city has I've spent X number of dollars on something. I mean,
I was asking because I heard you say there's no registration, but you're talking about a listing of people who have engaged with the district on expenditures
That was my understanding when Director Bram Edwards described
Yeah,
what she wanted in here.
I view
They're
this
kind of
as like,
splitting hairs, but I'm
this is a
curious.
report of who's registered versus what I was talking about was reporting. So for the example, the city of Portland, every quarter, well, the same to the state, every quarter and then annually, you have to report engagement, whether you've spent any money. This is just, you register and there's a report. Does that make sense?
Okay, it does. I was thinking report as an active, reporting out regularly. But yeah, it does make sense.
It could say, I mean, given that very,
It's just a
what,
word.
analog level of reporting, right? It could just say, the district shall establish a public registration system on its website, and that may be more clear what the expectation is. I think and reporting is just another way to describe the function of that, but I don't think it's a separate thing. Because it has on its website, and that was the list, so I don't know if that's helpful or not.
To remove reporting.
And it would say, the district shall establish a public registration system on its
System.
website for those to register on its policy. The reporting is that people can see it, right? You could register on a website and then it
Sure.
goes someplace else. The idea was this is you. I
It's a
think,
public
yeah.
record.
It's a-
Yeah, you can go to
Yeah.
like Metro and see the 25 firms who, waste management because they care about the landfill or garbage hauling or something.
I would be okay removing the and reporting, because the reporting again sounds active.
How about
So
just report?
the district shall establish a public registration and report, rather than the district shall establish a public registration system on its website. It's not even a system, it would be like a document
Report.
or a report. A public report,
And report on its website for those required to register under this policy.
What about just posted? Registered and posted.
yeah, it would be posted, it's a static,
It says on its website, so we have the on its website language. Again, I think there are lots of different ways to.
How about just say,
Express.
post the registration on its website?
Publicly available?
Shall establish a public registration and post it on its website.
yes.
Okay, did you
Let's
get that?
keep going.
Cross out reporting system and just put in post it.
And posted on its website.
Anything else?
Could I ask, I actually want to,
Can I just, one
Okay.
clarify, hold that thought, just before we leave that. Is it okay to say the district shall require a public registration and post the registrations? It may be that there's an intake form that looks different than the thing that's posted, right? So there's a summary, you fill it out and it maps to a list. Same content?
Yes.
I just want to make sure the individual, I think that.
Much like Google Forms.
Right, exactly.
Yes. Okay,
So
yes,
I
so it's-
just say, the district shall establish a public registration and post the registrations on the website. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Director
oh,
Wong?
before the conversation moved on, I wanted to ask a follow-up of Director Sullivan to, I don't know if you'd be happy to share some of the, you said you talked to trusted people and they said it was a good idea. You don't have to share who, but just a quick synopsis. I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, I talked to Janice, and then she contacted the purchasing person, Emily, and they both, well, Emily thought it was fine. I just didn't want to make more problem for them. And they were fine with it. Janice, of course, with her audit skills, thinks it's really important to have this. So I really am not familiar with this kind of reporting system, so I went to people who are, and who I trust, so that's where I got it.
Great, thank you. I
Mhm.
appreciate the thoroughness of the looking into it and things.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping for to hear.
I appreciate you didn't just Google it. I think it's good generally that, you know, it increases transparency, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Recommendation from the committee to move it to the board for first reading.
Yes.
Any objection?
Second. If we do that, we don't
Okay.
second, do it.
Yeah, well, we're not approving it, we're just recommending it out. And just for transparency, I did talk to Christy, who, like me, has lived in this world for a long period of time. And I'm going to sort of ask her to sort of shepherd it along. And so she was happy to do it. Again, this is something that it's just part of our regular life. Probably, like, I don't know what those things are for a kindergarten teacher, but it's sure it's not the lobbying registration. Okay, so we'll send that out. The next item on the agenda is the amendment to the ethics and conflict of interest policy. In the it relates to section 8, and probably the easiest way, because there was so much redlining. The version that's in the board book, it's now a two-sentence amendment. Current board members may not apply for or accept any offer of employment from the district. Exceptions are granted if a board member sends a written communication to all board members stating their intent to potentially pursue school-based employment in the district. And so just to share how we got to this, and then we can have a discussion or questions, in November of last year, I raised this with the policy issue in the policy committee. On January 13th, we had another policy committee meeting. On February 25th, we had a policy committee referral to the full board. On March 18th, we had a first reading at a board meeting. On April 3rd, at that meeting, with the first reading, then the April 3rd, there was an amendment for a school-based exemption in a board member's last 6 months based on concerns raised by Director Wong. On April 8th, we were scheduled to have, on April 8th, we had the first reading that had the amendment that had been offered about school-based employment, just knowing that there's a different hiring cycle. On May 16th, or May 6th, there was a second reading scheduled. And because of other things on the board agenda, we moved the second reading to the next full meeting, which wasn't till June 10th. And so the second reading, and we had policy committee meetings there where this was listed as an agenda item. On June 10th, we had a board meeting in which Director Wong wanted to make additional changes. I sent something out to the full board. Subsequently, Director Wong and I had a conversation. He wanted some additional changes. I thought that I had made them reflective, and I believed it was this version, but we can have a discussion about it because that's what the committee meeting is for. So, and during the time when Director Wong and I talked about it, he wanted this committee to have further discussion, so that's what this time's about.
Well, didn't our whole board voted to send it back to the committee? The whole board. So,
I'm sorry, did I say something different?
No, I thought you said that Eddie Wong, Director Wong's, you had a discussion about it, but
Well, I had
the
it
entire
after.
board decided to send it back to here today.
Right, and what I'm saying is, this version is different from what I sent out after the board meeting.
It is.
And what I'm saying is this version came from a conversation I had, because what we talked about at the meeting, which I thought I captured and then sent out, I then subsequently had a discussion afterwards with Director Wong, and this is what I thought reflected of it.
I just want to kind of correct, we had a discussion first, and then the crossed off version was sent to the rest of the board for review. However, this version here has, or the original one that was sent out to the board after our discussion had school-based crossed off. But the problem here is that this version does not have school-based crossed off. So there's discrepancy between the one that was shared with the board and this current one.
Yeah, and as I mentioned to you, Director Wong, and that's why we're having a committee discussion, is I made some changes based on the discussion we had, and all along, the exemption had been for school-based employment, and that this strikeout was an error on my part of sending that out with it still struck out. But I had, like I say, all previous versions I thought you made a compelling case that the hiring cycle is different for school-based employment versus central office employment. I say,
Yeah.
this is the committee's preference if they want to. This is the opportunity to offer changes. I mean, I say there has been at every policy committee meeting when it's been out for first reading, had an opportunity for people to offer changes in committee, so.
Yeah, I just want to offer really quick. The only version I was okay with was one without when school-based was crossed off. And the reason for that is because a good policy allows for maximum flexibility in case unforeseen circumstances come up, right? For example, we don't have a problem of people knocking on our door to work here. And I just want to address the reality. We've had a finance office that was unstaffed for almost 5 years. And so the reason why I was okay with school-based crossed off, again, this is just my 2 cents to offer to the committee, was because number one, the superintendent is not directly involved in the employment of most of the employees in this district, whether it's school-based, even people like, for example, the maintenance workers in our maintenance department are not hired by the superintendent. They're hired by the office director or chiefs or whatnot. And so there's already levels of separation. Actually, there's 3 points I want to make. Number two, we already have Oregon ethics laws that address a lot of this. I think I just looked it up right here. ORS 244.040 and .045 I want to also mention as well. So I'm a little bit worried that the more specific we are, the more we're almost double legislating this issue. And then the third thing, or not the third thing, it's still the second thing, .040 on that part of the ORS actually explicitly names certain departments and avenues that people cannot apply for their job, until a year after their employment serving in these areas. But I don't know if it was purposeful or not. This is something worth looking into, but school boards were not listed under there. And I'm curious as to why. And so that would be, I think, also something to look into. And then I guess my third and main point here is that we really should be focusing our work and our policies. And I want us to take the time. I didn't want to, overstep or skip over the role of the policy committee and allow the policy committee to have a voice in drafting the final version. And I guess what I mean by that is that the question always that should be like our centering question is, does this help or hurt students? And I don't really see many ways in which this helps students. I can see some ways that can actually hurt students, right? We potentially had examples in the past where it may have actually it could lead to hurting the district in a few ways. So when asked that question, my thing is, what's the hurry? We don't have people who are currently looking for employment in the district. I'd rather spend the time to craft something that can be achieve its goal, but also allow for enough flexibility so that we're not hurting us or the district in the long run. So anyways, that's my 5 cents. Thank you.
So do you think this does that, or do you think?
I think having school-based in there is problematic. And the reason for that is because I think without school-based, it still achieves its goal, because what we have here is a restriction, but you are allowed an exception if all the board members are notified. Therefore, it allows public transparency. And by notifying all the board members, right, it's subject to public record laws, which means that if people wanted to look into if there's any shenanigans going on, they can, because this is now public record. Not only that, but all board members are notified. And so it allows its oversight and transparency without being overly restrictive, especially in potential scenarios that could actually hurt the district.
How do you see that being publicly transparent? How are people going to know to ask for a public record?
Because when they find out a board member is suddenly working for the district,
But how would?
I would think that would be kind of obvious.
Oh, so it would be afterwards, people would have a public records request about whether somebody was applying for a job before they notified someone?
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, PPS actually has very strong policies in terms of the hiring practice. Actually, has policies and
Actually,
practices in terms of
I'm just trying to
hiring.
get at how the public would know, because you stated that this would add transparency, but I see if somebody sent a communication to board members that actually the public wouldn't know unless a board member publicly shared it.
Yeah, well, I assume that we have 7 elected board members. If all the rest of 6 of them are notified and there's something going on, it's also the board's job to oversee itself.
But that's not public. I mean, that's more of like board, just, there's
All
there's-
it takes
there's
is one
visibility.
board member to say, hey, there's this thing going on, and suddenly people know.
Is that what you expect people to do? I mean,
Can we also get back to,
well, I'd like
This-
to sort of
Okay.
settle this question, because I think if that's what we're saying, the public is it's not really accomplishing that. So I would suggest if you dropped it, to have something that it be put in some sort of report that it's just public, because otherwise it's not public. And I don't think we should, I mean, as a board member, I wouldn't think it would be another board member's responsibility to share with the public, so it's public.
I would just like to say that I agree that I think this policy doesn't really do enough on its face in terms of transparency, which I do agree should be something that we're looking at here. It's there is, an informal process, but we don't really want to rely on an informal process, especially with something like transparency. There's a lot of people who would be really mad if all the board members just forgot to tell people that someone's, working, and there's a possibility that there could be some outcry about that. They're like, I didn't know that my board representative is, working for the district. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just want to reply really quick, because this issue of transparency is not the original question that you asked. The original question was whether it's school-based or not. That has nothing to do with transparency.
I guess I was just going to your argument. So I was, I felt that the questions you raised and the concerns about just the cycle was a legitimate concern. And frankly, at the very beginning, I thought having it be the last 6 months made sense of somebody's term, that they, could go back to if that had been their profession before, they shouldn't be exempted from that. And then you raised that also, maybe in the middle of the term they'd want it. So it's okay, I also felt that was somewhat reasonable. I think it's naive to think that a principal who's interviewing a sitting, or any manager who's interviewing a sitting board member, is not going to feel some imbalance of power. And I think that's completely true for the central office. And I think it raises all sorts of potential ethical issues for board members to be, I use the example of, so everybody reports to the superintendent. The superintendent, not only do we evaluate them, we vote on their compensation, we vote on budgets, we ask them to weigh in on, on pretty much every item that we vote on. And I think it is, it's a classic imbalance of power, and that, I just think it will be very unfair to employees who have a board member in the pool. I felt like for a school-based employee, there's some distance. Again, I think it's still hard on principals or who's ever the hiring manager. But school board is a volunteer service, so it shouldn't prevent people from going back to their profession.
This already states that you may not work for the district while you're on the board, right? In another part of it, so we know that.
Right, that's actually in current statute.
Yeah.
Again, I
I-
strongly disagree. I just want to say that policies are not. There's two parts. Again, just a refresher. Right? We have policies and then we have administrative directives. And the reason we have it set that way is because policies are supposed to be 30,000 feet above the air. Their general guidelines, spirit, set the direction, and then we have ADs to specify how it's done. And the reason it's done that way is because things change. Right? We have AI now. We have things that we didn't have in the past, and so having the AD being flexible allows it to change, and obviously with the spirit of the policy intact. And so this one of the issues I have is that when we have a policy that is overly prescriptive, it makes it very hard to change, and it can actually cause more damage than it solves. In fact, there's been multiple cases of policies that are overly prescriptive that has actually caused a lot of unintended consequences, and also maybe even raising costs for the district. And so one of the things that I want to also point out here is that, again, the absolute issue, I can almost guarantee everybody who has worked in education before is not really concerned about this. We have a problem of getting people in the door, not the other way around. And so, again, the essence of this is it's a solution looking for a problem. I mean, we don't have a history of board members taking advantage of their position, trying to find employment in the district. We don't. Maybe at the state level, sure. At the county level, sure. But not in schools. I mean, we have people who are overworked 12 hours a day, at least, and underpaid. And so it's like, this is something that if we don't or we're not careful with, could potentially hurt the district, right? For example, luckily we found an amazing CFO, but what if we had a CFO that was on the board? Or let's look at also the equity issue, because a majority of our employees are teachers. A majority of our employees are school-based. Also, a majority of our employees also, like working in the district, like maintenance crew, they're not paid a lot. And so it's very likely that if someone decides to run for the board, especially if you want people from, not the upper class, that they may economically have a difficult time, and 2 years in may choose to want to go back to work and not able to serve on the board anymore. And that's a very likely. So if we're trying to lower the bar to entry and allow people to go back to their jobs, in the middle of their, maybe they need to quit the board. And so having a situation where we say school-based, then what about all our, security officers, maintenance workers, all the people who are not maybe at cabinet level. And so I understand the intent of this. I just don't agree that this is a real problem that it's solving. And not only that, but by solving it, and I'm fine with you trying to solve it. I don't mean you and anybody individually, just in general you. Generally, you trying to solve it. I am worried about it raising the bar for entry for a lot of people.
I think that's an equity issue that's concerning to me as well. It also feels like a problem or a solution looking for a problem. We had, I think, one time 13 years ago where somebody on the board did apply for a job.
And got a job made especially for them.
Yep.
That was a
And
high-paying
that's
job.
kind of water under the bridge. And Director Wong, to your point about, how the policies that we create can hurt or harm people, particularly when we look at people that are earning not very much money. We want to encourage those people to serve on the board as volunteers. And it's not easy to serve if you're struggling financially. I can speak for that specifically. So I don't even think there's a problem that needs solving, but I would be willing to continue to talk about this if it's agreed that we've got a problem that needs to be solved. But right now, it doesn't seem like we have a problem that needs to be solved. Additionally, I just went to a policy institute at Howard through the National School Boards Association, and they were pretty adamant about saying any policy that you develop needs to be student outcome based. It would be a completely different story if we had parity between, our white students and our students of color, but we don't. We have a large spread. We as a board, as the adults, should be 110% focused on raising those scores and doing everything in our power, including policies that do that, and not spend our time and our volunteer precious time that we can't get back looking for a problem. I would be willing to keep this on the table, but I don't feel like it's ready as it's written.
I think we should remove it from the table because, frankly, it's slipping into being completely irrelevant. I'll just note that this is an amendment to a 8-page policy around ethics and conflicts of interest, which I hope the board believes that's an important thing for us to set as a standard for a public school district. So this isn't like some new thing. It's part of a much larger policy. I think it's setting high ethical standards. It's a stretch to say this is going to hurt students. I actually think when people trust people in elected office, that they ran for the board not to find a job in the district or to be able to get it easier to get a job at the district, that they ran for the board because they wanted to serve in a volunteer capacity on behalf of our school district. I guess I would go back to the original. And I purposely went through this at the very beginning, the amount of time that we had on the committee to people could offer suggestions. I don't believe that this is at all transparent or public by just notifying other board members. So I think that would be, so I don't think that should be the claim. So if you wanted to say that this was the way that we're going to set an ethical standard is by having it be public, I think it needs to be something else. And again, I thought in the spirit of our conversation, Director Wong, that I had captured that, but I clearly didn't. But I don't think this captures or leads to transparency, because as a board member, I wouldn't be outing somebody else's or sharing somebody else's information. So that's unless we ask the individual that is doing it themselves.
It almost seems like the way this is written, it doesn't make any difference. Anybody can apply. I mean, anybody can send a written communication and say they're going to do it. So,
well, to me, that's why school-based. To me, that's why school-based. Because in theory, you're supposed to wait till after you get off the board service before you apply for a job, because you have a natural. Frankly, you have a natural advantage if you're a board member and you're applying from. You're the top of the organizational chart. And so, again, I feel like for school-based jobs, that's very different.
Because of you have to apply 6 months ahead, pretty
Right,
much. And that's
because
what we
of,
talked
because of
about
the
in the
hiring
first place.
cycle.
Yeah.
And, everybody else, this is maybe just like we come down to different places. I think people should wait till they're off to the board. Or if they feel like they can't serve on the board and they need to apply for a job, then they should leave the board. Or there needs to be some method, but that's more public, because this is not a public process, and waiting till after they get hired, and a principal has maybe felt pressured to hire a board member because they applied, and they have, board members can create issues for
My
staff.
issue with that is, what if they get rejected from the job?
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Right, like I mentioned this in our board meeting, but like when we apply for jobs, it's normally general practice that it's a private affair, because there's many reasons you could be rejected. It could, you could be down to 2 finalists, one person just has a little bit more experience, or you could just be totally unqualified, or you could be a plain jerk, right? And so there's many
Or
reasons
maybe-
why you don't get accepted, and so having it, again, this is another issue that I think this policy committee needs to address when pursuing this, is what happens in the worst case scenario. Like, for example, if I'm a public figure and I apply for a job and then I publicly get rejected, now I have a black letter on my forehead, and no one's going to, we live in the Facebook world, right? Or no one's going to look into why you got rejected. They're just going to say, oh yeah, this person got rejected from this job, and we're not going to hire them either. And so we're talking about public volunteers. This is an unpaid job. And I also want to specify, in terms of, we have this perception of the board member, in Oregon law, it defines that, or policies, it defines that single board members have no authority, have no power. Only the board as a whole, as a unit, actually has any power to make any decisions. And so there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is because, again, having a full board, 7 elected, in our case, 7 elected public officials making decisions ensures proper discussion, sharing of, or potential arguing of ideas to strengthen our decision-making process. And so, again, this is something where, again, I also personally think this is not ready. I think there's a better way to do it.
Okay. It's 5:15, which is when the meeting was supposed to end. I would say, going forward, as a courtesy to committee chairs, committee members, that when something's on an agenda, to look at it in advance. I would have appreciated several times when things came up at the board meeting that they'd come up in committee, because then we could have had discussions about it. Because I think that leads to actually better policy making versus waiting to the second reading. Because the reality is we had no public comment of people having issues with it. So we can leave it. We can leave it in committee, and I'm fine with that. I don't think we should move out a version that has school-based, because, again, I think it's extremely naive and it sets a very low ethical standard to have board members applying for jobs in the central office or ones that are within the superintendent's span of control. So with that, I'll just close the committee and we're done. We'll send one. Thanks for sending one committee policy out for the first reading. Appreciate everyone's work, and Michelle and Patty, your service on the committee this year. And thanks for coming to the one board meeting. And Eddie, thanks for coming to many of the meetings.
If I may ask real quick, when are we being sworn in? I'm pretty sure, is it July 1st?
Yes, I thought it was July 22nd.
We have 2 ceremonies. So one is the legal one, which I think is just going to be notarized, and then there's a ceremonial one, which is going to be on July 22nd.
Got it. That makes sense.
And the reason for the ceremonial one was because the other board members wanted it to happen on July 22nd. And also
because
of
that's when they'll
travel
all be in
conflicts.
town.
Yeah, all travel conflicts,
The
etc.
one day.
But we want to do it
legally.
legally, I think July 1st, because we don't want any holes in coverage in case something comes up.
Anything else?
No.
Thanks for coming to the first meeting.
Yeah, well, it's like my second policy committee meeting.
Okay.
Technically, I should have been at 3, but I missed the first one because
Okay.
I was at site council.
Okay, well, thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
All right,
Yeah.
especially your summertime, I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's easier in the summertime because theoretically I have nothing going on. Clearly not today because I was
okay,
late,
that's such a great
but,
attitude, and you like,
You know.
you got a
Theoretically,
tie on too.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I'm gonna adjourn.
Yeah. So this is, oop. We're going to open the committee meeting for the charter school board committee. And we're going to hear, go over the staff memo. Yeah, I think she's trying to turn. Is that better? Yay.
I think it's better.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds better.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you for being here. Happy summer.
Thank
Yeah, so we're here to hear the annual performance framework and report for the charter schools, and that's Emerson, Portland Arthur Academy, Le Monde, Portland Village School, Kairos.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. Not POIC?
That's an alternate school.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well,
And I don't know if we need to do introductions. Could we quickly do introductions, starting with Kara?
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Michelle DePass, board member.
Julia Brim-Edwards, board and committee member.
Patty Sullivan, board committee member.
Eddie Wong, board member.
thank you. Karina Wolf, Senior Director of Schools for Multiple Pathways to Graduation.
Sunita Sandoz, the Director of Charter Schools for PPS, and I recognize some of you because I was the lead administrator at the Emerson School, one of our PPS charter schools, for 8 years prior to taking on this role. And this is I just completed my first year in this role at PPS.
Excellent. And were you one of the people that they were like, there was some administrative changes?
That is
report.
some of the administrative changes that are mentioned in the memo and in the slides, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So thank you, board members, for having us. We are fulfilling our statutory obligation as a district to report out on each charter school annually. And so what we are going to do today is share about a little bit about charter schools and Portland Public Schools, our mission and our role as an authorizer. We'll give an overview of each of the charter schools, share some of the charter school demographics, answer questions, and have time for public comment. And there are more materials that were in your packet that are the performance frameworks on each of the 5 charter schools that PPS authorizes. And Sunita Sandoz and myself will go back and forth in the presentation.
Excellent, thank you.
Sunita, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Would you like me to just read through it? Or?
Sure.
Okay. The charter schools mission, the mission of the PPS Charter Schools Office is to support and monitor a high-performing and innovative PPS charter school portfolio, to promote equity and learning for all students, to advocate and act as a liaison for the district in its role as a charter school authorizer with PPS charter schools, and then also to educate the charter schools, parents, stakeholders, community partners, and the district about Oregon charter school statutes and best practices.
So the role of the authorizer is to review and approve make either an approval or denial on the annual applications for the establishment of new PPS charter schools, to conduct ongoing oversight and annual evaluation, to determine whether charter schools meet expected outcomes, to recommend charter renewal, to implement interventions for underperforming schools. We serve as the fiscal pass-through agent for all of the state school funding. We create conditions that improve student outcomes while protecting schools' statutory autonomy. Maintain a respectful and mutually beneficial relationship with each of the schools, their school leaders, and boards of directors. We provide resources, professional development, and cost-neutral assistance. And we providing access and information systems and data, and we serve as a conduit between the district and schools through communication, advocacy, and partnership. And lastly, we serve in the role of developing knowledge of schools through frequent informal visits throughout the year.
The Charter Schools Office located within multiple pathways to graduation, provides support to, I should say, it's just under 1,800 PPS students attending 5 PPS-sponsored and 2 state-sponsored charter schools. So we're just under 1,300 for the 5 PPS-sponsored and approximately 475 at the 2 state-sponsored charter schools that are within the PPS boundaries. Compliance with ORS 338, Oregon Public Charter School Statutes. Oversight and support includes a weekly charter directors meeting, and then subsequent meetings beyond that. Completion of initial application review, contract renewals, and annual reporting. Support and accountability of annual fiscal, operational, and academic reports. That looks like the frameworks that were sent to you all in the materials. And school site visits, we do those on a monthly basis, and then there's a formal site visit at the end of each school year with each of the schools.
As Director DePass mentioned, so we have, there are K-5s, are the Emerson School, Kairos PDX Learning Academy, and Portland Arthur Academy. We have 2 K-8 schools, which are Le Monde French Immersion and Portland Village School. And then the 2 state-sponsored charter schools are also both K-8s, and that is the Ivy School and the Cottonwood School for civics and science.
This is just a general charter school overview that our office put together to give you all a sense of where we are right now in this moment in time. Because there's no formal board committee work, I just wanted to let you all know when when the schools all started and where they are in the process of looking toward a renewal. The next renewal for a PPS charter school will be in 2029, and that will be the Emerson School. And that is because all of the schools in this past, most recent renewal period received 10-year charter renewals. So again, 2029 will be the next one. That's not to say that we're not looking at the schools on an annual basis, and those frameworks of taking a look, the deep dive into the academic and financial and organizational health of each of the schools happens on an annual basis. But the renewal with the district for a charter, the next one will happen in 2029 for the Emerson School. And this is just current enrollment. And we've got some interesting facility updates that I just wanted to make sure everybody knows. That's been, I think, a hot topic in the charter world and with the PPS board for years now, since charters need to find their own facility and pay for their own facility. We have a couple of schools that have moved into new facilities and then stable leases for all of our other charter schools. So it's feeling like a moment in time where there is stability in terms of facilities for charter schools, and that feels good.
Okay, so just a little bit about each of the schools. So the Emerson School is K-5, as we said, and its focus is project-based learning. So the enrollment at Emerson School is 130. They are one of the schools that Sunita was just referencing. They moved to a new downtown Portland location, not far off of NATO Parkway, that was successfully renovated January of 2024, and they have a 15-year lease with a 5-year lease option. So this is their first school year in that building, which is very exciting. In 2023-24 OSAS scores, which are the last scores, of course, that we have, it shows that 62% of Emerson students meet or exceed an ELA, which exceeds district ELA scores by 5% for students in grades 3-5. 56% of Emerson students meet or exceed in math, which exceeds district scores by 3% for students in grades 3 through 5. Additional assessments, as charter schools, they have some autonomy in the assessments that they use. So at Emerson School, they're using, the assessments include guiding reading, running records, Lucy Calkins in writing, Bridges math, end of unit assessments, and project rubrics.
Okay, Kairos PDX, their focus is eliminating racial opportunity and achievement gaps. Their enrollment is currently at the end of the school year at 205. They have a new school leader in the principal role. Timothy Rogers started in this past December of 2024. And we have put a note in there that there have been, over the last 2 years, there's been transition in their administration, and we've seen some turnover there. 2023-24 OSAS data shows that while Kairos underperforms the district in ELA, and I put in the percentages just so you have a frame of reference, 35.4% meet or exceed, math 23.2% meet or exceed. You'll notice in the performance framework, if you take a look at that we also take into consideration sort of apples to apples, and look at the fact that Kairos students, the majority of whom are from historically underserved races, align with district scores, and that Black students at Kairos outperform the district in ELA by 3%, which is 20% at Kairos meeting or exceeding, and Black students align with the district in math in grades 3 through 5, 12% meet or exceed. This year, Kairos qualified for Title I intervention, and some additional assessment material. They do use MAP, Fountas and Pinnell, and they are the one charter school that is located in a Portland Public Schools building that they lease, the old Humboldt Elementary School.
May I interrupt and ask, when I read this, the OSAS data shows that students at Kairos are underperforming by quite a bit. And is there no requirement, even though we're comparing apples to apples, it's still like very disturbing, like it's okay because that's how all the Black kids are doing. But in a charter school that has, I think smaller class sizes, is there any reason why we wouldn't have an expectation that we want more rigorous, we want to have a higher expectation?
Absolutely. Yes. And
Like,
I can say yes. And you can also speak to this.
I know you probably agree with that, but I was like, that just seems really like.
So one of the things that I'll just say with Kairos, and they would say, I believe they would also say if they were here, but one of the things that we observe and will say, that I will observe and say, is that in the last 2 to 3 years, not unlike some schools post-COVID, but they have had multiple turnovers in leadership. And we put a note with intention around Principal Rogers. So Principal Rogers was also, when SEI had their middle school, Principal Rogers worked with Principal Linda Harris. And Principal Rogers at SEI at that point in time became a model school. And the district year over year as a model school, and we feel very positive, as does Kairos leadership and board, of course, who hired him, in Principal Rogers, and as a new school leader who came in mid-year. So I think the last couple years they've had a principal change in the middle of the year, which I think is hard on any school. And so, yes, and I think we are very hopeful and excited with stability for Kairos in the future.
The other thing I wanted to add is when Karina and I went and did the annual year-end site visit, obviously these types of questions were on our brain, and meeting with the administration and learning about their 3-year strategic plan, their internal plan to impact not just these scores, but impact enrollment and their internal assessment data, et cetera, I feel like some of those questions were addressed in terms of this strategic plan that they have put in place, and that felt like a good conversation about acknowledging where they are in time and also setting sights on the future.
With some very specific instructional coaching and professional learning communities. So some of the structures that they have in place, not unlike some of the other schools, but some of the structures that they shared and showed us and that they have in place are very are very reassuring.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
How are they, I mean, I know we're trying to do the same in all of our schools.
Yep.
So how are they different than what our, not charter schools are trying to do?
So Sunita could say much more, but I'll just say a couple things. One of the things about charter schools is by statute, they have autonomy over their curriculum. And so that's one way that they are different in how they organize themselves as a school. There's more autonomy because each charter school has its own board of directors. Each charter school hires all their own staff, with the exception of special education staff that are Portland Public Schools staff that go to all of our contracted schools as well as our in-district schools. So I would say curriculum and how they organize themselves are two things that stick out, and I don't know what you would.
Well, I'm just thinking about being in the school and visiting the school and seeing a racially affirming and culturally affirming school in action. They have a program built in that this just, I mean, I'm just kind of, it makes me feel good to talk about, but where every classroom is aligned with an HBCU, and they create an identity for the children within that classroom community based on the HBCU, and they have just a really rich, culturally affirming I won't say curriculum, but program, I guess. That looks different
Culture,
and feels
environment,
different when
like,
you're in the school for Black children and children of color. And what we see and what I can say anecdotally is it makes a big difference. Of course, we want to see data follow that, and we'll watch this, the strategic plan. We'll watch leadership as hopefully we've got a solid leader that will stay at the school for a number of years that we can follow. But when I visit and speak to families and children and staff members, it feels different I believe, for those students and families of color.
Do they also have smaller classes or limit size of classes?
I actually don't know if they cap their classroom size. They do have smaller classroom size, but I don't know if they've got a cap on their enrollment in each class.
Okay.
I have a quick, hopefully quick clarifying question. This doesn't just apply to Kairos. This is for all the charter schools listed here, because listing percentages of ELA school scores if they exceed or not meet it. It looks like some of them are, but not. I don't know. I'm not sure if all of them are, but are all of them controlled for demographics?
Controlled for demographics in terms of?
Yes, say more.
Like for example, whether historically underserved, high income, low income parent, education status. Because one of the things I want to just make sure that we compare apples to apples, right?
Sure.
When we're looking at ELA scores, we already know that kids who enroll in charter schools, there's a higher percentage of them that have parents that are more involved than typical. Not always, but there's a self-selecting, issue there, right?
Yeah,
And
condition.
Condition. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And so, a lot of times, not all, of course, there's many exceptions, but a lot of times in charter schools, you tend to have, like, for example, higher SES being represented and things like that. So I'm just curious, like, when we look at these scores, like 5%, like Emerson is exceeding district for 5%, but is that controlled for
You can
demographics?
look at
So
slide
I think
16, which
so
shows all the demographics.
Yeah, I've seen that, but
schools, which
I was just going to say that. So if we could just continue, there's a slide in just a few slides where we talk about the demographics against each school and then against the PPS district average. Would that answer your question?
no.
Because
think
you're
I-
maybe referring to the lottery process?
No. So
Okay.
okay. Yes, I know about the chart on 16, and it has some, like, for example, direct certification, historically underserved, right? but it doesn't necessarily control for like SCS level, like parent educational level. I know this is probably not data that we have, but I just want to throw that out there. Are we comparing apples to apples? And one of those things is actually looking at, parent income, parent SES in terms of, what percentage of the school falls in what category. So it has some of them, but not all of them. And that's, I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Yeah, we don't have that information for any of our schools, like how much parents make or what education level. I mean, that's not standard reporting data.
Correct.
Exactly. And I want to highlight
But I
that
think
discrepancy.
yes, I think
lack
it's
of data.
important. It's interesting. It's kind of like banks don't report the race of mortgages that they hand out, and that's a problem.
So I would just say
Anyway.
that 2 of the 5 in district authorized charter schools are title schools. So Portland Arthur Academy and Kairos are both qualified for title. So we can share, that is some information, but Director Brim Edwards is correct. We don't collect parent income data it's limited across the board.
Yes, and that's what I thought, and I just bring that question up to highlight that we
Sure.
don't have this data. And so when we look at, for example, like ELA data is 3% higher than, we don't know if their education level of their parents on average are 3% higher than the
Sure.
district average. And the reason I point that out is to highlight that it's not apples to apples, because we have charter schools that are self-selected population. That may or may not be a bad thing. It's not a judgment on that, but I just want to make sure that when we compare our data, that we're clear that it is not perfect data. And I just want to highlight that. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that, we don't know what the mean is because the mean varies by building.
Yes.
And we couldn't even get that through census data because of the dispersal of people like driving. So I don't know. I'm a researcher. I like to look at data. Apples to apples is ideal. But I hear what you're saying is that we're comparing schools to the overall outcomes in the district,
Sure.
not to itself, right? Thank you for letting us interrupt.
No, absolutely. Totally
Because
fine.
I had that question too.
Did
Can you
you?
isolate the reasons for the success of some of the schools where they're outperforming? That's question number 1 that I had. Could wait for later.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I'm like, what can we learn from
And
Le Monde, L'École Française? What are they doing right? And is the outperformance due to the socioeconomic status, or is it due to having 2 languages?
Sure.
Yeah, great question. So if it's okay, we'll just finish the last few slides, and then I
Sure.
love the questions. So speaking of, Le Monde French Immersion is next. It's a K-8 French Immersion. It's an IB school, world school, and it's an IB in the primary years program. Its enrollment has 376 students currently, and the 23-24 OSAS data shows Le Monde students in grades 3-5 outperforming the district by 22%, 79% of their students meet or exceed in ELA, and outperform the district by 22%, 75% of their students meet or exceed in math. In grades 6-8, Le Monde students outperform the district 34%, with 89% of their students meeting or exceeding in ELA, and outperform the district by 31%, with 75% of students meeting or exceeding in math. Also of note, 100% of their graduates, their 8th grade graduates, meet high school language credit requirements prior to starting 9th grade. The additional assessments used include MAP, DIBELS, and ADAPL, and they are located in Inner Southeast.
Okay, Portland Arthur Academy, K-5, direct instruction is their program. Their enrollment's at 162. State assessment data shows 70% of Portland Arthur Academy students meet or exceed in ELA, exceeds the district by 13% for students in grades 3 through 5. 50% of PAA students meet or exceed in math, which trails the district by 3% for students in grades 3 through 5. Math is a target area of improvement for PAA in 25-26. Of note, over 20% of PA students are English language learners, and their data shows that their English language learners exceeded district English language learners by 42.9% in ELA and by 16.8% in math in grades 3 through 5. This year, PAA qualified for Title I Targeted Intervention Program. There are additional assessments, Easy CBM, Mastery Learning, DI, Direct Instruction Program assessments. Their assessment is incredibly regular and constant, and they are located in Southeast Portland. They are, just of note, they are a consortium of Arthur Academies. They are one of 5 in the sort of metro area of Oregon. Yeah.
And then the last PPS-sponsored school is Portland Village School. Portland Village School is a K-8 Waldorf-inspired standards-based education school. They have an enrollment of 421 students. They are the other school that purchased a new facility this last year on the South Waterfront with the assistance of the Oregon Facilities Authority. They received occupancy and opened their new school last September of 2024. The 23-24 state assessment data release shows progress towards improvement. The school shows a 7% increase in ELA scores from 49 to 56% of students meeting or exceeding, and a 5% increase in math scores from 42 to 47 over their 22-23 assessment data. Additional assessments that Portland Village uses includes Easy CBM, Bridges Math, and end of unit mid-school math assessments. So they are one of the charter schools that is using some of our district, they're choosing to use the district adopted curriculum in part, and are seeing positive results with it.
This is just a note about our state-sponsored charter schools. We've mentioned there are 2 within PPS boundaries. In Portland, the district does provide special education services and pass-through of state funds, state school fund and SIA dollars, while ODE provides oversight for these schools. General education students are not included in PPS Synergy, so they're not counted in PPS numbers. Special education students are included in PPS special education numbers.
Exactly what that means, that, go back. Can you go back to that slide? Okay.
Sure. I mean, I think this is just, this slide highlights sort of where our PPS charter school office interfaces with these schools in terms of passing through dollars, and that special education services are provided by PPS at these schools. But there's not an oversight, which is why you won't see a framework. I'm not doing site visits to those 2 schools. We do invite those schools to our weekly charter directors meetings, and they do attend because we're all speaking the same language and in the same, yeah, it really is a community of practice. And that I've really appreciated that as well, because each year there seems to be a little bit more and a little bit more that is asked of the district in regard to working with these 2 schools.
By ODE.
By ODE. Karina was mentioning earlier that there are, or at this point in time in Oregon, there are 4 state-sponsored charter schools, and 2 of them are in Portland. And we have an office and some infrastructure, and also just the way grant reporting is evolving, we seem to have more and more overlap with these schools in terms of their reporting being embedded in district reporting when it comes to SIA and the integrated programs grants. Special ed,
Special ed and
100%,
fiscal.
yes.
Yeah.
Special ed and fiscal, yeah.
How does that
Pass through.
impact our costs? Because I know it's state sponsored, but I also know that the state also caps special ed funding at $11 11%, right? And so having a state-sponsored school and yet PPS is on the hook for, which is fine, not a judgment, on the hook for servicing special ed services. How does that affect in terms of like cost?
Well, I think that's a great point. The special education, I mean, all students, when they are in our district at charter schools, they are PPS students. And so as far as special, even with our state-sponsored schools, that is true as far as special education goes. So that is when you're asking, when we have information about the entirety of the number of special education students and the entirety of funding, that is including our charter schools and all of the places, all of the buildings and all of the schools they provide services to. So that includes our charter schools.
Great, thank you. Because I know that PPS is reporting at something like 17%, and this includes it includes these schools as well, the state-sponsored schools
Yes.
as well. All right, thank you.
And then just a little bit about those. So Cottonwood has an enrollment of about approximately 200, and the Ivy School has an enrollment of approximately 275. And this was what I was getting to, which I think we were referencing earlier, which is just looking at the number of, with regard to income, the closest that we have around that, as has been mentioned, is our direct certification numbers, and our information around title, which Portland Arthur Academy and Kairos have qualified for title. So this is just a reference point for everyone. And that's really what we had, and then we would love to answer any questions if there are any.
Do we have any questions?
I can't remember the name of the school where they had a lot of English learners, but they were scoring higher than most other English learner schools.
Arthur Academy.
The Arthur Academy.
Yeah. Are they looking at what's happening there? I noticed it was direct instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Are they learning from that what we might apply
So I
to
think-
ours?
So I think Director DePass and yourself are bringing up very good points, which is outlined in the statute. It talks about charter schools being hubs of innovation, and part of the responsibility of the sponsoring districts or of the community, both on the district-sponsored side and on the charter school side, is how are we sharing learnings? And I think that's an area of ongoing, growth for us. So in years past, we've had schools that have, like Opal School or other schools that have put on conferences to talk about their model, where we had, as an example, we would say, Portland Public Schools teachers, would you like to attend this training or this training locally? Kairos has done that in years past, where they have had series of trainings where they have opened it to Portland Public Schools teachers. But I don't know, honestly, about Arthur with PPS in recent years.
There has not been, but I think we're all looking at that data. It's pretty significant. It's an area of pride for the school. They do, and I've asked anecdotally questions when I'm visiting, and I've seen in action their small group instruction. Direct instruction is really prescribed. It's highly structured. It demands sort of immediate feedback. It's teacher driven, demands feedback from a student. Certain learners learn really well in that environment. It wouldn't be ideal for every learner. And I think families, the school has worked hard to, I think each charter school has been working hard, I would say, in the last decade and 5 years, since the pandemic, to really tasked at looking at demographics and saying, how can we impact our demographics? How can we change not only the narrative around charter schools, but also the who's attracted to these schools, who's coming to these schools, who can access these schools. And they've done an incredible job of really leaning into their community where their building is, and have grown their population of students from underserved communities. And they are having that success They're proud of it. We're looking at it. But there's there's opportunity for these schools to be seen as lab schools, and like, what are they doing, and how do we learn more from that?
That was
about
quite a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they traditionally, when we gave them the charter, it was somewhat controversial because direct instruction had sort of a bad
Yes.
reputation. It was kind of drill and kill, is what they called it.
Yeah.
I think we gave them the charter in 2003 or 4. But they're located in Ascension Church on 76th and Yamhill, which has a traditional parish, but they also have a very active, lots of Spanish masses and everything else. So it's a very community-centered facility. And I mean, they're probably one of all these. Emerson has been around a long time too, but I think Arthur Academy is the second longest.
Yeah.
They have a very much of a niche, but it was controversial when and at the time, districts could not refuse to give a charter. So if they had a charter application that was met the most basic, you had to give it. So PPS gave a lot of charters in those years. But it turned out it was a pretty good bet and has filled a niche.
It has filled a niche. Yeah.
I love, I know I have a brother that could have really used that direct instruction that, this is what is expected. There's no creativity around it. I know that's worked for me too in some circumstances. And my kids went to Emerson, and that was, it just happened to work out for where I was working at the time. I could pick them up and walk them across Burnside, and it could be at my work for a little bit.
Yeah.
It was really nice. I don't really have any questions. I asked my main question is isolate, the reasons for the success at some of those schools. And also I'm always curious, you always hear, we'd like to get more diverse and we just can't, and transportation is an issue. So, especially for the schools where they're successful, I would love to see, more of our kids that are struggling be able to attend, because I think the diversity is really important too. Economic and racial, gender. So,
I do have a couple questions. This is not the question, but there have been national studies that do control, for example, parent income, parent education level, and performance at charter schools. But it's a national study, and overall, just in general, not very favorable for charter schools. It would be interesting to look at one specifically for PPS for Portland, because I know we're in a different scenario than most of the country. So it would be one thing I don't know if there is any avenue, or maybe it has already been done, but maybe even partnering with the university to look into, for example, researching data on when you actually do control for parent education, parent income level, and demographics, and how they compare to our kids that are going to comprehensive elementary and middle schools. I think that'd be very valuable, and I would push for some kind of look into that. My other two questions, I have two questions. One is, am I correct in understanding all our charter schools are a lottery, and it's purely lottery, right? There's no denying of applications and things like that going on, right?
Go ahead.
Enrollment is dictated by statute. There's lots of things, as Director Brim Edwards just said, that are outlined by statute around the authorization, the application process, the enrollment, and the lottery process.
So the lotteries are blind lotteries. I only say intended because there are a number of our schools that use a weighted lottery. Other than that, there's no controlling for, who's applying and who's
Except for siblings and stuff, right?
Except for siblings. You can apply to ODE for a waiver. The only schools I have seen apply for a waiver outside of a weighted lottery is Kairos, and they applied for a waiver this year to have children of staff members be able to attend the school. So other than that, you would have to apply for a waiver for any of those special circumstances. And like I said, Emerson and Portland Village School and Kairos have been using a weighted lottery to try and impact the demographics at the end of the day. Emerson and Portland Village School were using a triple weight for race and socioeconomic status.
Okay, it's
So-
helpful to hear.
Oh,
Go ahead.
So Arthur Academy, it sounds like, does it take a higher percentage of
No,
English as second
I
language?
mean,
It doesn't.
That's
Okay.
I'm going to stand up my
'Cause you're
apologies for
tired of
my
it.
legs.
So a number of years
Yeah.
ago, as a part of our racial equity work, one of the things we did was really look at the demographics of charter schools and think about as a community of practice with charter school directors and charter school boards, what are the opportunities to have charter schools look like this, more match the demographics of our district? And in a good world, actually serve more historically underserved students than our district. And so one of the things that all of the schools did was to get all their brochures translated and all their information translated into the 5 major languages, and to go out and do recruitment and share in a variety of cultural communities their information. And Arthur did that, I think, with great passion, and the others did as well. But Arthur is a success story in that way, where they were very thoughtful and deliberate around how they could reach communities of color and communities of multilingual language learners. And so that's where that has been really successful. But in part, it was our shared work with Portland Public Schools in getting materials translated and having and really partnering with them in our shared effort and intention.
So reaching out, but still having the straight lottery.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
I wanted to offer, a friend of mine just accepted the Dean of Education at Lewis and Clark position, and he'll be starting in August. And he kind of volunteered, I had lunch with him, he volunteered his graduate students, he doesn't know them yet, but he volunteered them if we needed them for any policy research or anything education related, so that he's looking for projects.
That's good to know. Thank you for sharing. I think that's what sets PPS apart from a lot of places, and it's great to know. My other hopefully last question is there any dropout and discipline data as well, like in terms of looking at kids that have dropped out, kicked out, suspended, discipline data, and the demographics of those students as well?
I don't have that. We don't have that prepared today,
You
but
don't
we
have to
can
have
certainly get that and share that.
Sure.
Yeah, it would be great to have a little bit of oversight on that as well.
Okay.
I had, I don't know if you're done.
No, I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. I was curious, we have in the past met regularly with the charter committee, and I think we took a hard look at the committees last year, and we're trying to not have a meeting for meeting's sake. So I was going to ask you, as the experts, what a regular cadence would look like that was fulfilling our, baseline obligation, and also allow us an opportunity to hear from, because your work is important. We don't want to just, put it off to the last meeting of the year. But is there
but we did.
is there a regularity that you would recommend in terms of how often we should do this, and where?
I would defer to Karina in regard to the sort of statutory requirement of annually presenting. And then working backward from there are moments in time that will also dictate what work is to be done from a charter committee. This particular school year, for example, there's an annual opportunity for people to apply, to become a PPS charter school. Letters of intent are due in May, and then an application would be due in July. We did get a letter of intent, and then they we were in communication and ready to have sort of a Q&A meeting with them, and they said, nope, we're actually not going to apply this year. So had they moved forward with the application process, that would then require work from a committee that would look different than when we don't have an application. And then the other moments that I can think of besides these renewals that will start up again in 2029 is if a school wants to change anything in their charter. For example, one school was kind of asking about the possibility of changing their enrollment cap so that they could enroll more students. That would have to be the work with the committee as well. But in terms of a cadence, I defer to you.
And I would just say, just a note, is that the letter of intent is preferred, but not required, is my understanding. But the applications, there is a hard date for applications. So while it is unlikely, because we haven't heard of it yet, somebody could apply by the July date. But they ask for the courtesy of a letter in May if that's gonna happen. So I would say, I mean, at a minimum, right, is meeting the statutory, is being compliant with statute. And if not, maybe, more frequently than that, to hear from the schools or hear about practices. I know that in the past when we have had a charter committee, it has been nice at board members' request to go see the schools or to hear more information. So I think it is nice to have some kind of cadence, and we would defer to you all.
I just wonder if we
we
would,
stand ready to support and to share information, and to take folks to schools as you would like.
we want to be supportive also. I guess I was thinking, I mean, if we met 3 times a year, it would be regular. If it wasn't needed, it could be, okay, everybody gets the night off, but it might be nice to schedule it, looking at Kara, ahead of time, so we have an opportunity and a placeholder for those conversations. It's just an idea.
So-
Looking at Eddie.
So one thing in the
Dr.
past, instead of just having a charter committee, there's been like a charter and alternative ed. So it gave a lot of schools that didn't ever get really any airtime or much consideration, an opportunity to engage with the board and central district staff and raise issues. And I know, like, when Director Green and then Director Constam, they did some, I think, really important work that helped provide more support for those schools, like changing the pass-through amounts. And you go way back, you had an Ed Options, which had basically kind of all the non-neighborhood school programs. So they were the ones that approved, say, like the language immersion programs, Sunnyside Environmental, Creative Science School. So it was a place where you could get, that you didn't have to have at the board level be doing that work. I mean, but you could go in deep. And I will just say, when I was on the board, we had to take the charters away or deny two charters that had been operations. And it was really important that we'd had a committee and we had engagement, so it didn't just seem like the board was coming in randomly and making a decision, but that they had the courtesy and, like, they were like not on a corrective action plan, but they had been told, you're not financially going concern, or your outcomes are, not at all what we'd expect. And I forget what's it called when we
had to do a close. We've had to do a couple closures,
like Victory and what was the other?
Leap and Trillium.
Oh, I was involved in all of those. So it's good because I think it respects the school community and people who have really, like, poured their hearts into building a school. And sometimes it just doesn't work out, and the board is ultimately the one that has to do it, and seems more respectful that and you've worked with them. So I would say, like, more often. One thing I wanted to comment about just the data, and something that this came up when we the last time Le Monde, received, I don't know if it was a renewal or the first time around. But they clearly, their demographics are very skewed to have very few direct certification, fewer special ed, fewer students of color, the fewest historically underserved students. And we had discussions with them. I think that's when they started translating all their, but really, like, what are they doing to diversify their school to be more representative of the PPS school community? And I know they're not up for renewal now, but I think it's worth asking what they're doing, so they don't just get asked in the year that they have a renewal, because it looks like the pattern hasn't significantly changed.
So thank you for that. Just to reiterate what Sunita said earlier, is that when we have Sunita we both go and see schools, Sunita more often than myself, all throughout the year, and then we have an whole process of an annual review and site review, and we have various lists of questions all throughout it. And particularly, this is what's really nice about the weekly meetings, is this topic is an ongoing topic with all of our schools, and so that question is not it's a common, you bring up a very relevant issue. And what I have heard most recently, and you can certainly add to it, and is from Shuka, their head of school, is some targeted outreach to pastors and specific churches. And she actually has done some connecting with Director Green around some opportunities. And then I think with some other specific community outreach to specific communities of color.
Absolutely, and leaning in on those weekly meetings, because you've hit on something that other schools have impacted the bottom line in terms of their demographics. And so Shuka, being a leader, saying, well, I'm trying this, and this, what are you all doing in this small community? Which is how she got the idea to look at churches and speak with pastors, and because is another school that has had success in that way. So I will say it's not for a lack of trying. It is ongoing work. They recognize it. They are looking at it. And I think when you look at the demographics, if you look at 10 years ago and today for these schools, you will see a number of schools have shifted the demographics for all the reasons Karina mentioned, and Lamont's still struggling to do so.
They haven't really
that is
switched.
clear.
So you can say that a board member
Yeah.
inquired
Absolutely.
about their progress on that, because
Yeah.
we had a pretty lengthy discussion. They were looking at immigrants who came from French-speaking
Yep.
Yes.
countries.
Yep.
Not France, but French-speaking countries. So I don't know if that
They have
results in
had
anything.
success in regard to their staffing, in terms of attracting and employing native French speakers from African countries and other countries outside of France, which I think is a move in the right direction, because we all know that visibility within the building is important as well. So there are shifts that are happening there.
I'm realizing I'm going to have to keep your number for a few more years.
Yeah.
Because of your institutional knowledge. You've got so much history, and I just can, in this moment, just want to appreciate you for what you're bringing. Just the history of knowing which schools have done a better job than others. So thank you.
You're going to carry on that legacy.
I have a question about how many high schools have French programs that the Lamont people go to?
That's a great question. I let you speak to that.
Okay, so McDaniel, Lincoln, I feel like Cleveland, but I should, I know McDaniel and Lincoln for sure, and I know that there's multiple, that there's more than two. I can happily get back. I apologize. I'm not.
Just curious.
It's in the back of my head, and I'm not pulling it forward right now, but I can get back
That
to you
might be
about
some
that.
reason.
There are
you
multiple
don't have
high schools that have French.
I hosted a French exchange student from a small town in the south of France. He was like, no one speaks French, like around the world. He was studying Chinese. He just said nobody speaks French.
And I will just say to Director Brim Edwards, so the Ed Options is changed its name to Multiple Pathways to Graduation. So when that was the change years ago, after I came to the district. So that's kind of the department. So there was a lot of, that's where I think it was the charter schools and alternative programs. It was meant to be broader than Multiple Pathways to Graduation, but a lot of it was about the MPG schools.
I mean,
or
it really gave
programs.
the board a lot of visibility to, what it was, virtual scholars. I mean, the whole range of programming weren't traditional neighborhood schools, which tends to be the central focus.
Reconnection Center services. Yep.
Well, thank you very much. I know it's probably been a really long day. We appreciate your, this was a great presentation and learning opportunity. And I appreciate your input to how much we should meet going forward.
And again,
Looking
we
at
defer
Director
to you
Wong,
all.
we're trying to, right size it in terms of, the time commitment for board members and also thinking
Absolutely.
about staff too, like we sit out here and look in the audience and people are just, 10 o'clock at night not wanting to be here. And so we're trying to, right size the number of meetings and the types so we can just be as effective as possible.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
I think we're done.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director Brim Edwards. for
I
being at your
know.
last board
Last committee meeting.
Last
meeting.
committee. We could have brought cupcakes.
I'll just say, the only board member to be on all the committees this year.
Wow.
Finance and
You definitely
Finance,
pulled.
audit.
Oh,
That's
my-
why when Roseanne said, do you want to come to this committee? It's like, okay, I'm going to
You got a perfect record. Are
You
you like a
should
baseball player?
earn something, a gold star or something for that. Yeah,